Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us tonight. We've learned the defense for Sean Diddy Combs will put on a case after the prosecution rests later this week. The defense signaling it plans to call as many as 3 witnesses, possibly more. But the biggest question remains, will the hip-hop mogul take the stand in his own defense? Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial. This week, the government's last remaining witnesses are testifying. Today, the jury saw messages from Combs's employees about freak-offs and an alleged drug deal. The jury also seeing text messages and emails pulled from one of Combs's devices showing travel arrangements for a male escort. This device likely seized in one of the 2 FBI raids on his homes last year. Federal prosecutors showing the messages as they try to prove one of the charges, transportation to engage in prostitution. Also today, the judge standing firm on his decision to dismiss a juror Friday. A new juror is now in place, the male alternate, a 57-year-old architect active in Boy Scouts who now makes the jury slightly older, whiter, and less urban. How could that impact the case? We'll talk to a jury consultant. But first, we begin with ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katersky. Aaron's been in the courtroom throughout this trial. He joins us live now outside the courthouse here in Manhattan. And Aaron, let's start with the jury. Bring us up to speed here. Why was one of the jurors replaced?
Lack of candor, according to Judge Arun Subramanian, Eva. He said that the juror had given inconsistent answers when asked a basic question, where do you live? And he gave these answers, said the Bronx, New Jersey, and couldn't quite reconcile the two. And the judge said it raised some serious concerns in his mind, not only about the juror's candor, but whether he was making a deliberate attempt to get himself onto the jury. He said, this is why we have alternates, to eliminate these kinds of questions. And so he decided to remove the juror from the panel and replace him with that alternate who will now be in the room to deliberate once the trial reaches that phase.
Yeah, you mentioned that alternate juror who's now going to go to the deliberation room. Did the defense raise any concerns there?
That it's going to make the jury less diverse. This was a 41-year-old black man who said he was from the Bronx. The replacement is a 57-year-old architect with a master's in mechanical engineering who lives in the burbs up in Westchester County, north of New York City. And so it does slightly alter the makeup, but the judge said he wasn't concerned with this particular jury about it being diverse because there are already a number of other individuals of color who will be deliberating Sean Combs' fate.
The prosecution is expected to rest its case soon. What happened on the witness stand today?
The jury, for the first time, saw videos of freak-offs. They put on headphones and they kept their gaze at their monitors. Now, the monitors in the courtroom were shut off, so we couldn't see the excerpts depicting Cassie Ventura with male excerpts. But as the clips were playing, we could hear music and faint moaning sounds coming through the headphones of some of the attorneys and the jurors. So they've gotten now to witness what's at the heart of the case. And it paired with travel records, hotel receipts, credit card bills that showed Sean Combs and his business paid for flights, paid for the hotel rooms where the freak-offs occurred. And that helps prosecutors perhaps prove, Eva, one of the charges against Sean Combs, transportation for the purposes of prostitution.
And I know the witnesses that were called to the stand today, they were being called summary witnesses. For our audience watching, just to clarify for them, what exactly is a summary witness?
So they work for the prosecutors. One was a paralegal, another was one of the investigators, and their whole job is to help authenticate different exhibits that prosecutors have organized into different charts. The jury has seen so many exhibits during the course of the 6 weeks of evidence, more than 500 by our count. And so some of these summary witnesses just put in a manageable form. For example, one of the summary charts involves all the freak-offs from 2009 all the way to 2024 when Jane said she last had one in August of 2024. So the jury was able to get a visual representation. Who was involved? Where did it occur? if there was travel involved, how was it paid for? And federal prosecutors hopes that can help the jury focus when it comes to deliberations. And it also gives them an opportunity to introduce exhibits like travel records or text messages from witnesses who did not testify.
The jury today also got to see not just the video that you mentioned, but other text messages today. What was in those text messages?
They were talking about some of the events, and the text messages are key because they're from, say, Christina Coram, Combs's one-time chief of staff. She is not testifying here at trial, but she's been talked about a lot, and her messages, you kind of get the other side of conversations that witnesses have talked about. So when Mia, for example, one of Combs's former assistants, reached out to Christina Coram, she said that, Christina Coram told her not to worry about certain things, and the jury got to see Coram's actual response, even though she wasn't actually testifying. And this is, I think, the prosecutor's way of trying to give jurors a fuller picture about the alleged sex trafficking, the racketeering, and the transportation to engage in prostitution.
Aaron Kotarski, our chief investigative correspondent, thank you so much for being with us again today. And let's dig in more to today's testimony. ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer, you were also in court today. What stood out to you?
So I think in the morning when we talk about these summary witnesses, the first thing that stood out to me were just the text messages, some of the correspondence about booking flights, booking hotels. And I think that's where the government is really trying to show this interstate aspect of the case, transportation, engaged in prostitution, as well as sex trafficking. But of course, in the afternoon, when all the jurors donned those headphones, looked at their screens, and for the first time actually watched a freak-off that came from Cassie's device. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, I think a freak-off video is probably worth 1,000,000, and they're very focused on that as well.
The two summary witnesses, you called them summary witnesses. We had Aaron explain to us what a summary witness is. What was their role supposed to be
So
today?
let me give you the legal definition. Whenever you have a case that has voluminous amounts of information, don't forget there are several terabytes of discovery in this case. A summary witness is often an individual who can create charts, graphs, or visual aids to help the jury understand all of that information. And for most of what we saw here with the various text messages and information both from Christina Coram's cell phone as well as Sean Combs' cell phone that showed about the various text messages and logs when it comes to traveling and whatnot. Two different individuals. We had a paralegal as well as SDNY special agent of 10 years. Now, typically, summary witnesses are paralegals. I think in the next block, when Bernardo comes here, I'm going to save my argument for then. I think it's very interesting that I had a special agent here for this role.
Brendan Paul, can we talk about him? He's expected to take the stand this week for the prosecution. What do we know about him?
Former Syracuse basketball player, former assistant to Sean Combs as well. Don't forget, if you go back in the past just a little, he was arrested, actually this is incorrect, March 2024 back in Miami with drug possession of marijuana and cocaine, got a plea deal, no indictment, and then all charges were dismissed. Now, I think the expectation here is that they're going to try to connect it to the racketeering definition as it applies to Sean Combs. We've heard of Brendan Paul a number of times when it comes to the conversations of providing drugs for Sean Combs or people associated with him. Don't forget, one of the predicate acts in the RICO is drug distribution. They just need 2 or more of those predicate acts to try to make out the RICO. Then they're trying to prove it here.
Okay, we are hearing now that at least the names of some of the defense witnesses, because they will start their case soon. What do we know about them?
Yeah, so we have about 3 witnesses the defense said that they're going to put on to begin with, beginning on Friday, they expect. Vashtas Dunlap is one that they mentioned, and that name came really easy to recognize because that is the vice president of Bad Boy Entertainment. Don't forget, this is a RICO conspiracy. I would assume they're going to have something to say about this not being a criminal enterprise, explaining away many of the arguments that the government has put forward. We also know they're going to have a summary witness as well. And so those are just the first few witnesses. They perhaps will continue on to the following week. And I think we're going to expect summations sometime around next week. Don't forget that everyone wants this case to end before July 4th.
All right, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much. And we'll have more with you in just a bit. Still ahead, should the hip-hop mogul take the stand in his own defense? We'll get perspective from both sides. Plus, the jury shakeup, despite the defense expressing concerns, the potential impact of a new juror stepping in. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for streaming with us. As the prosecution gets ready to wrap up its case this week, let's take a look at the legal strategies we saw playing out in court. Brian Buckmeyer is here as the defense. Bernardo Villalona analyzing the prosecution. Bernardo, let's start with you. We saw that agent today going through some of the things they found on Combs's devices. What was the point of all this?
So remember doing the defense opening statement that they said, you will not find any evidence that there was a criminal enterprise here. Here's the prosecution ramming it down the defense throat in terms of the text messages, in terms of Christina Quorum being well aware of these freak-offs actually happening. Because before doing cross-examination, it was like, well, how will these employees know that Sean Combs was actually engaging in a freak-off inside of the hotel room? Well, here you have Christina Quorum asking at one point, well, how long do you think it's going to last? Well, probably until tomorrow night, talking about one of the escorts that they saw in the lobby that the personal assistant saw. So you also had confirmation in terms of Sean Combs' enterprise paying for these flights, paying for these hotels, having drugs being transported, dealing with transportation just in general of some of these escorts being flown in. So you have the transportation to engage in prostitution. And even at one point, they were able to point out a text message where they were asking about drugs, and Sean Combs was like, come on, be smart. Like, why are we texting about this, pretty much?
I mean, I guess you can make that stretch. Christina Quorum is not saying how long is this freak off going to last. No, she's asking how long are these entertainers going to be there. It could very well be that Sean Combs has people taking off their clothes and dancing, and that's what Christina Quorum knows it to be. That doesn't mean it's a freak off. It can very well be people doing finger puppets. Like, Christina Quorum isn't saying, I'm facilitating a freak off, this is what I'm doing. And so if you want to make that stretch, great, but there are reasonable doubt built into the enterprise that exists here. Sean Combs is a businessman of multiple businesses, and people are going to set up hotels. People are going to set up hotels for him, people are going to clean up things for him, people are going to do things for him. They also have people on the stand who already said, I don't do this for my job. I do this because I like him and I want to advance my career. That's not an enterprise. That's people working for you.
Let's not forget the one question that the defense walked right into, having to deal with Dante, which was the personal assistant, when he was asked, did you ever engage in any criminal acts on behalf of Sean Combs? And his answer was yes. Technically, the prosecution can just run with that one-liner throughout their whole closing arguments to meet the criminal enterprise part and meet also that they were engaging in criminal acts on behalf of Sean Combs.
I think if you read it from a transcript, I think you're absolutely right. I think you can make that case. But if you're actually sitting in the courtroom, you see that sass that he's giving Xavier Donaldson, and you know he's kind of talking under his breath, I think you could take that as a facetious statement of trying to take a dig at a defense attorney for asking a question and not an actual truth. I think there's a way to work around that.
The second summary witness that took the stand today, Brian, you took issue with this witness.
So, I mean, and Bernardo will know this far better than I, because she's a former prosecutor. And typically, in my experience, a summary witness is a paralegal, an intern, a person who say, you know what, just take this document, make a chart, you're going to be a part of a big case. But instead, they got a 10-year vet who was also an officer. And they were going a little bit further than just what the original summary witness was saying, here are some documents, I uploaded them, they're true and accurate, here's some other. They were trying to draw an inference that because there are text messages, because a hotel was booked, because a flight was booked, then they all must have met at one location, and they don't know that. And I think they did that purposely with a person who was law enforcement to try to garner credibility from that assumption. The defense made the objection, I think the judge made a proper ruling, and in the afternoon that was dispelled, but that reeks of desperation for me, that they need someone to make that assumption to tie it all together for them, because they don't have that.
Is the prosecution desperate?
I think the prosecution just took out the issue of having to deal with credibility when you're talking about this one witness, because to hear that this is a special agent and not just a paralegal, and a special agent you would think does investigation, conducts investigation, looks at evidence, makes determinations based on their investigation. So by putting that one witness up there, it gave credibility to the entire investigation and gave credibility as well as validity to the summary charts that were presented. And also remember, this is the same special agent that actually had the freak-off videos that were played for the jury that the jury actually got to watch. So tying it all together.
I would say it's manufactured credibility, because you could have given that video to anyone to put into a chart.
You're right.
Why do you need a special agent to do it?
I have to ask you, because we're getting to that point in this trial, Brian, if you are Combs's lawyer, are you advising him to take the stand?
As a defense attorney, I prep all of my clients to testify. I run them through the gambit. Sometimes I might even bring Bernardo to cross-examine that person. But I would not tell him to get near that witness stand with a 10-foot pole. This is not a person that I think should, one, testify. This is not a case where I think the defendant should testify. I don't think this is a case where you want to put the credibility of Sean Combs up against the credibility of anyone else. You want to point the finger at the government and say, you can't prove this case, focus on their flaws, don't look at my client, he's exercising his constitutional right.
You, as a prosecution, you want a person, a witness like Sean Combs to actually testify, because it also changes the deliberation process in the sense that the jury is no longer focusing, did the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? Now they're turning their deliberations to, let's focus on, do we believe what Sean Combs has said on this stand? So of course, also remember, there were a lot of evidentiary rulings that didn't go in the prosecution's favor because they were missing a link here or there. But if the defendant were to testify, then guess what? You're my missing link, and I can confront you with what I wasn't able to get into evidence by him testifying.
There are a lot of text messages that we haven't seen, but I bet exist, where Sean Combs is one of the parties and Christina Coram is another, D-Rock is another, someone else. And they can't get those text messages in because they don't have those witnesses. But if Sean Combs takes a stand, as to Bernardo's point,
ding, 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 let's go.
Those come in. So it's not just about the witness, it's also about the evidence that the government now gets to put in if he takes a stand. I don't want those in, and I think that's the best advice you give to Sean Combs. It's not about you, it's about what they'll do to you.
The dismissal of this juror, does that pose a problem for the defense?
I don't think it poses a problem. I think if anything, as any defense attorney, any government or prosecutor, you look at the jury as you get information coming in and you see the head nods, you see the body language, you see how they lean towards you. I think the way that the defense fought to keep this person in, they must have felt that there was some sort of body language that suggested that they had this juror, and they're also probably looking at juror 13 and saying, I don't know if I want to dance with a devil that I don't know. I want to dance with a devil that I do know. I don't think it goes beyond race or whatever it may be. It's just they might have felt more comfortable with that individual rather than the next juror. But we saw that person in the jury stand now. He seems to be paying attention in some aspects, kind of drifting in others, but we'll see.
All right. Thank you both for being here with us, as always. Coming up, a jury expert on the new replacement juror who will now help decide the fate of Sean Diddy Combs. Also, the mental exhaustion jurors could be dealing with after more than a month of hearing from witness after witness. Plus, why Bad Boy Records is trending online today after the latest day in court. Stay with us. Welcome back. As the prosecution prepares to rest the big question, what does the jury think of what they've heard so far? We are now in week 6 of testimony in this trial. On Friday, the judge dismissing juror number 6 over questions about where he lives. The defense pushing back on that decision, but the judge today saying he wasn't going to change his mind. Quote, there's nothing the juror could say at this point to put the genie back in the bottle. Now joining the jury, the first alternate. He is 57 years old from just outside New York City. I'm joined by jury consultant Claudia Colon for more. And Claudia, first, if you could just explain to us what happens when a juror is dismissed.
Yeah, it's not completely, uncalled for in a trial like this one that is so high profile. You're dealing with a celebrity. Something, is always going to come up, maybe. We saw it come up here. The juror, as you just said, wasn't being completely honest with the court, and any semblance, anything that could give the optics of people potentially being biased or having ulterior motives, immediate dismissal. What happens now? Somebody steps in, as you said. There's a juror from outside of New York who's an older gentleman who's going to step in and take his position. These alternate jurors, they've been watching the whole trial. So it's as if they're jurors, they're just not in the jury box. They're kind of like the understudies, if you will, who come in when stuff like this happens.
And the defense made a really big deal about losing that juror because they said it changed the makeup of the jury. What might that tell us? Well,
They also made insinuations that the prosecution wanted this juror out because it was a black male who was older, who, by their analysis or by the demographics of this person, they assumed that the defense probably saw them as favorable, or they knew themselves that it's probably favorable for the defense. And so that's why the defense is raising alarm, saying, this wasn't enough to dismiss this juror. Yes, he might have been not totally consistent about where he lived, but it didn't rise to the level of, creating an issue about having ulterior motives or being a stealth juror. That's kind of why there was that tension. But I will say, my experience as seeing juries all over the country and all these different types of trials, it's the juror that's replacing him is not a total loss. older males tend to be better in these types of cases where you're dealing with the issue of consent, just because, the whole notion of psychological manipulation is a more novel notion, it's not as traditional as these older gentlemen tend to think.
I have to talk to you about just the sheer volume of hours they've been sitting, this jury, in this court. 6 weeks of testimony, hour after hour of witnesses. Are they exhausted?
Yeah, it's a long trial, and they still have a ways to go. The defense hasn't even started putting their case. And it's true. They are likely fatigued. It's day in and day out, and it's not like any other case, where you're just showing up at court dealing with the, ordinary case. It's a high-profile case. Every morning when they go into the courtroom, they have to walk by the press. Every time when they leave, same thing. So it must be exhausting for them. But I will say, again, in my experience as a jury consultant, jurors take this role very seriously. So they see it as a job. And they really honor to be a part of this process.
Claudia, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, it's time to see what people are searching for online. The latest searches range from will Diddy testify to is Bad Boy still in business? ABC News contributor Kelly Carter is here to break it down for us. She covers entertainment and pop culture. Kelly, one of the most popular search topics tonight surrounds Combs's bodyguards. What do we know about him?
Yeah, D-Rock. So D-Rock's a former bodyguard of Sean Combs, but D-Rock's history with him goes a little bit further back. He was the childhood best friend of Notorious B.I.G., the rapper who really kind of set Bad Boy records into the stratosphere. And I think people have been curious to see if he's going to take the stand and what he knew. And of course, he came up in testimony again today.
Everyone wants to know. Yeah. Will Diddy testify?
That's the big question, right? And I think we're going to get our answer relatively soon. It seems like the prosecution is getting ready to rest their case shortly. They've kind of given us an indication of who else they're calling on the stand, and we'll see if he is going to testify. So just be a little bit more patient, people. We'll find out soon.
Another question we're seeing, is Bad Boy still in business?
Yeah, Bad Boy Records is absolutely still in business. Now, is it, chock full of all of the artists that it's had over the years? It is not. Right now, the people who are technically still on Bad Boy Records would be Christian Combs, one of Sean's sons, and Janelle Monáe is still technically a Bad Boy artist, even though she releases her music in collaboration with a larger conglomerate. But yes, it is still in business right now in 2025.
And in that same thought, people are asking, does Diddy own Biggie music?
It's a great question. Actually, in 2023, Sean Combs reassigned all of the music publishing rights back to his artists. So right now, the estate of Biggie Smalls owns 50% of it. And earlier this year, after the death of his mother, they sold 50% of it to Blue Primary Wave. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But it's a company that also owns legacy music. Like they own, Whitney Houston, Prince, Luther Vandross, people like that as well. And they take control of the likeness and all that good stuff. So no, the family owns half of that estate.
We should also mention that a lot of the web searches we're seeing are not even real. Kelly, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's an odd one, right? I think people are just so hungry to find out any information that sometimes I think people are falling for information that is not real. There are these AI-generated videos that are not truthful, and they're saying that certain people have testified that have not testified, and they're creating these videos. Don't fall for the hype. I know millions of people are watching these videos, but they are absolutely not real.
Good reminder for all of us. Kelly Carter, thank you as always for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial. The show streams right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a good rest of your day.